Well, welcome to this episode of Prophetic Perspective. Today we have a very special guest with us, Amir Tsarfati, who is with us all the way from Israel. And Amir, you are such a wealth of information sharing about what the Lord is doing and how all of His prophetic word is coming to bear in our own day and age. But for our viewers who may not know about the current events in Israel, can you give us an awareness of what's happening domestically with some of the political changes in the government and how some of the external threats are perceived there in Israel?
Yes. Well, first of all, a few months ago, as you know, Israel finally formed a government. It's not the government that I prayed for. It's not the government that most of the Jewish population in Israel prayed for. But eventually, somehow, a minority of left progressive plus center, and for the first time in our history, the Muslim Arabs in the land are forming a coalition that is very, very, I believe, dangerous to Israel. And it's also weakening the country, because when you lean on the Muslim Brotherhood's representatives in your own parliament, then first of all, how can you share information that is very, very classified in the parliament when they're part of the government? Another thing is, when you need to do something and take care of business against radical Islam, will you trust that the radical Muslims in your own government won't tell your enemy what's going to happen? So I believe Israel is in a very, very dangerous point. We're still enjoying the fruits of the prosperity of the former prime minister, former government. We are still thriving economically, and Israel is back on track financially. But I need you to understand that there's a new spirit now in Israel, the spirit of change, the government of change, they call themselves. And it's not a change for anything good. Just to give you a perspective, Israel was the second largest delegation in the climate change conference in Glasgow, Scotland, last week. What I'm trying to say is that suddenly we are now engulfed and captured by this progressive mindset that these are the more important things than dealing with other things that are we know burning within us. Now, that's inside. I see that Israel is becoming weak from the inside. We still have very strong military, but when the leadership is weak, when the leadership is not decisive, you can see that the mice comes out of their holes. But the second thing we need to see is that there is an ongoing attempt of Iran to literally entrench itself in Syria. It's already in Lebanon, in Hezbollah, and in Gaza Strip. Of course, we have them in Hamas and Islamic Jihad, but now in Syria, they are there. They are close to our border, and they smuggle almost every day amazing technology and weapons, and that makes Israel having to attack there almost in the last 2 weeks 7 times. However, because Russia plays the most important role in Syria right now, that makes us, we are under the mercies of Vladimir Putin at this point. Now, Putin smells that there is a very weak government. Meetings with Netanyahu would take an hour or two when they talk business. The meeting with Bennett took 5 hours, and he made him stay in Sochi by the Black Sea because he couldn't fly home because of the Sabbath. You can clearly see that he is taking him to a boot camp. And not only that, you can clearly see also that the Russians are looking at Israel right now as, hey, we will approve what we think might serve our interest, but if you cross the lines, we will be after you as well. And it's all that we need in order to understand how close we are to the Gog and Magog scenario, because Russia is, Prime Minister Bennett said, Russia is our neighbor from the north. It's not just a country in the north, it's our neighbor. It's just across the border. And so Russia is there, Iran is there. We all know that Turkey is also in northern Syria. And we can clearly see for the first time in history an alliance that only the Bible could have predicted. So we see that happening. We see progressive mindset within the country, and you see that eventually they will, and then you see the very weak administration in the United States. All that together, the convergence of all of that brings you to the understanding that it's closer than we ever thought. And I think that for the believer, what we see happening around us should not be something that we need to worry about, something that we need to be sad or angry or concerned about. We should be concerned about only one thing: spread the gospel as much as we can, because our redemption is drawing near. We need to be excited also. We need to be those that are eagerly waiting for his return. And there's no other time in history where the return of Jesus was so close, not just by ways of, yes, he will come, but also by ways of all the signs that he himself gave us to tell us that he is coming very soon.
Soon and very soon.
Thank you so much, Amir. Folks, if you're worried about what's going on in the world, know that the Lord is in control. He's got it all planned. This Gog and Magog war will eventually happen, but the Lord steps in and he defeats the enemies and he wins. We can put our faith and trust in that kind of God.
Amen.